We are trying to analyze the Paris Peace Conference of 1919. So we believe by this time, after defeating a country called Germany, great thinkers, David Lloyd George of Britain, Woodrow Wilson of USA, and George Clemenceau of where?
Italy.
George Clemenceau of which country? France. They sat in this kind of arrangement and he came up with the Paris Peace Conference. Paris Peace what? Conference. I remind every time our customer Farouk of Uganda quote, we say, believe that you can. Believe that you do what? Believe that you can. So we are saying that diplomats in the conference had great aims. They had to live out their differences and they had great what? Great aims. One of the aims was to establish lasting peace, security, and stability in Europe. You hear this? The diplomats aimed at establishing lasting what? Peace. You remember World War I destroyed the peace. So the diplomats wanted to establish lasting peace. No one was supposed to disturb what? Peace. Because World War I was so destructive. Many people died, over 13 million people died. So they wanted to establish lasting what? Peace. Another one, to liberate the various races formerly dominated by the vanquished powers. We are saying today, countries, those people that were being controlled by the vanquished powers had to be liberated. To be what? Liberated. In other words, they had to be given their independence. I think these diplomats had great aims. Another one, to disarm as much as possible both the defeated and the winning nations. Let me tell you today, they aimed at disarming countries because arms race caused World War I. Since arms race caused World War I, they wanted to disarm countries, to remove the military equipment from what? Countries, in order to prevent the emergence of another war in this world altogether. So we need to know the aims of the Paris Peace Conference: to redraw the political map of Europe as a means to restore the continental balance of power. Let me tell you, they had to redraw the political map of Europe. The political map of Europe had to be redrawn. To be what? Redrawn. To create what you call a balance of power. Not making one power to be above other what? Other powers. So they had to make sure that they balance what? Power. Because it was a question of dominance that disturbed things in Europe. So they had to balance power by redrawing the political map of Europe. Another one, to punish Germany and her allies for causing the war. Germany and her allies had to be punished for causing the what? The war. We believe by this time, Germany and her allies caused the war. You remember a man called Otto von Bismarck came up with the alliance system. Through his system, a man was in his grave and he caused the war. Can you imagine? Bismarck was in his grave and he caused the war. Because he left a system. Which system caused the what? The war. So by this time, the diplomats had great aims of punishing Germany and her allies for causing the war. Another one, to reward the winning powers of World War I from the territories of the defeated nations. The winning powers had to be rewarded by taking the territories of the defeated what? Nations. I can tell you that defeated nations had to lose their territories as a punishment. So the diplomats of the Paris Peace Conference indeed had great aims. Another one, to institute international cooperation among all powers and their associated partners. We believe by this time that diplomats in the Paris Conference aimed at promoting international cooperation. Countries had to cooperate with one another, because through cooperation, a war was going to be avoided altogether. Indeed, they had great aims and objectives. Then to uphold the principle of nationalism and self-determination by giving independence to small and oppressed nations. To uphold the principle of nationalism and self-determination. The principle of nationalism and self-determination had to be upheld. In other words, countries had to be respected. No country was allowed to occupy another country. Whereby this time, the principle of nationalism, where the small and oppressed nations used to be mistreated, by this time there was the principle of nationalism, and nationalism had to be upheld. Nationalism is about love for one's country. Nationalism had to be upheld. So we are saying, to conclude the Paris Conference, the allied powers of Britain, France, US, and Italy pushed their differences aside and signed the Treaty of Versailles. They had to sign the Treaty of Versailles with Germany on 28th June 1919. They had to sign the Treaty of Versailles 28th June 1919. I can tell you this treaty was so much punishing a country called Germany. The Treaty of